What do you think?
I'm hoping it's a go. Oh, darn.
It says it's recording.
Yes, I thought maybe that would help. Okay. You've excavated so much of this like subconscious world of that no one was getting when it came to relating, men and women to relating. And I hear it so much when people call me. They're like, why, is this my true love, or where's my twin flame? So I get that a lot. And so in the old era, right, people have been coming together for romance and all this stuff that then they find they're not getting it. So that's why I was like, well, I would love to talk to you about, what we're pulling from the old world, the last 2,000, 3,000 years of patriarchal relationships, what's working, what we need to know, and maybe towards the end, some juice about what's to come. Because I have a feeling you have a vision of what relationships can be. Like you're a future seer of where relationships can go. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense, but I also question our conclusions about where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think they've ever been patriarchal.
Okay.
So I think they've been adversarial. In my vision as a partnership, but patriarchal comes from women not understanding how much power they have with men and what their power is, and so we're under an illusion that they had power and knew it. And did some abuse the power that we gave them? Yes, absolutely. But for the most part, from studying men for the last 30 years, men's experience is that women call all the shots.
Wow.
That's their experience. They are, yeah. Their experience is how vulnerable they are to us, how much they depend upon us, how much we can hurt them and withhold from them and injure them. And so the so-called patriarchy does not live in a patriarchal world when it comes to relationship. On their side, we're the choosers. We're the choosers. And from us, we feel like they're the choosers, right? So we both think that opposite sex has all the power, and we're both wrong.
Got it. I guess I was kind of referring to
I guess we've started, huh?
Yes, we're starting. I love that. I love that. And I've always kind of known that secret, like watching my parents together. I'm like, ooh, mom's in charge. Mom's in charge. And then all this, I've studied 6 years of Marshall Rosenberg. I don't know if you're familiar with his form of communication, but it's a really beautiful way of communicating that speaks to our universal needs and feelings. It's a great modality, but I guess the reason why I bring that up is because there seems like that's what I've been using so far when in my coaching, when people come to me with problems as a couple. It almost seems as if a lot of the couples that I see are working with really, really simplistic language, if that makes sense. Like they're not able to understand what each other needs, which is probably why you wrote that book. I loved how I was doing my research on you, and one of the things I thought was so sweet was how you came about this path, which was first working with children and then coming to the conclusion. This is why I feel like you've got that future seeing part of you. You were like, well, let me think, how can I help these children best if their parents get along? And that really moved me. I thought that was really sweet.
Well, I think I was born an activist and cared about the end of hunger since I was a little girl. And then homelessness showed up when I was in my 20s, and my brother was homeless. And then, ended up, you're talking about systemic change, right? So I was the chairwoman of the county task force on homelessness. And instigated a study of homelessness in Orange County, and half the homeless were children. And then that led to the Orange County Summit for Children and all these things, which really came down to, like you said, how are children going to thrive when their parents are taking each other apart? Mm-hmm. And that coincided with my own beginning to study how I was bringing out the worst in men. It was about 4 years at that time. And so, yeah, what you said about simplistic words, we're really primitive in this area, and we're driven by primitive instincts that we don't recognize or own, that we haven't learned to. Instincts cause tension, and the tension compels us to do certain things. And mostly we've never been taught that what there is to do to have the kind of relationship that we want to have the kind of life that we want to have, is to learn how to be with tension, to feel tension and don't let it compel you to act, to just hold it, to just notice it, to just go, So my instincts have perceived a threat or an opportunity, which quickly becomes a threat that I might fail at it or waste resources. And okay, so this would be a good time to not act. When I'm most compelled to speak, most compelled to do something, most compelled to run, most compelled to fight, most compelled to say something mean, this would be a good time to do nothing. And yeah.
So wise. That is very wise.
But it's hard. It's really hard because honestly, what has our lives not work the most is right within us. And we have conflicting instincts. Men and women, people in hunting mode or in gathering mode, have conflicting instincts, and we tend to only have words for our instincts. And then from our point of view, we accuse the other of something, right? Like women accuse men of being stupid, that they can only do one thing at a time. And men accuse women of being scattered and all over the place. Mm-hmm. Well, what if neither of those is true, right? What if there's different kinds of awareness? And there's the awareness created by commitment, which is called single focus. And there's the awareness created by being open, which I call diffuse awareness, which means to pour in every direction. Mm-hmm. And single focus is excellent for hunting, and diffuse awareness is excellent for gathering, and really can complement each other amazingly well if we stop thinking the other person is misbehaving. Like, what is he hunting now? What is she hunting? Okay, he's not paying attention to me. So what is he hunting now? Oh, that's what he's focused on. Cool, right? Or her attention is everywhere, not just on me. So what's disrupting her? What's having her not be peaceful or able to just be with me? Oh yeah, the socks. I left my socks on the floor again. Oh, and I didn't make the bed, so she can't be in this room. It's too distracting. Here, let me try to calm down the environment so she has less input, and then she could just pay attention to me. Wow. And so she must not love me because she's not paying attention to me, right? So when we can understand that estrogen and testosterone and the way that they change over lifetimes and even over a day, depending on how much we rested, if we can understand how much that's affecting our behavior, instead of that it's personal, like what's wrong with me that he's glued to the football game, or gets home from work and doesn't pay attention to me. Mm-hmm. Like, shouldn't he walk in the door just so excited to see me? Because we don't understand transition time. Right? So I mean, I would say, Dawn, to begin with, my perspective is that so little of what's happening is personal.
I love that. I love that. That reminds me of a book I read. I think it was Don Miguel Ruiz, and I had it on my wall for a while. It's not personal. It's not personal. That's That's good to know. So that if your partner is obsessed with the football game, it's not because he doesn't love you or doesn't want to be with you or care about you.
No, not at all. And I know Don Miguel, and he is as loving in person as in all his Toltec teachings. He's an extraordinary human being. And yeah, what if even what you do isn't personal? That it's not because of your past, because of your sun sign, because of your right? Like, yeah, those things all come into play, but I think it's maybe 2% of our behavior is personal. Until we start making a lot of choices, right? When we hold instincts at bay and make courageous choices and up level what we're protecting, what we're providing, what we're creating, then so much of our lives becomes personal. You made an amazing choice at that time. That's a personal victory.
I love that. So you work with really the primordial, like the animal part of us almost. You know, I always say we have these we're spiritual beings, and a lot of people in my field focus on that. And I am constantly reminding people, hey, we're mammals, we're animals here. Like we got, the instincts and urges, and I almost feel like it has to be a balance of not repressing them, because that could be harmful in a relationship too, right? If you repress all your instincts, like does there have to be like a balance there?
Well, I mean, you're right on about it. And I use those words. I used to call it human animal and human spirit.
Mm-hmm.
But people started making human animal wrong. Right? So now I just call it human normal or human instincts and human spirit, right? And if you consider that they're both there all the time, there's human instincts and there's human spirit. And a lot of times what happens is human instincts eclipse human spirit. That compulsion is so strong that all you're getting is a fight, flight, or freeze reaction, right? But if you can recognize that reaction, right, and not let it act you, right, then if you can imagine a plus sign in between these two. So take the instinct to protect and make a conscious choice for what's worth protecting.
Oh,
right?
So what your values are, like,
that's
the conscious choice of what you're protecting.
Exactly. Or the instinct to provide, which the instinct is also to decide what other people need and then provide it and then try to collect appreciation for it. Instead, have the instinct to provide and add the courageous choice of and respect of saying, so I think you need this. Before I do anything about it, do you think you need that? That's one of the, if men and women just did that, if parents did that with their children, I think you need this. Do you think you need that? If we just did that one thing, all our relationships across the board would be 10 times easier, at least 10 times easier.
Wow, that's genius. Do you think you need that? Because you're right, there's a lot of assuming, I do a lot of assuming of, like, especially with my child, like, you need this, you need that. And I'm like, you need nurturance. And she's more focused on, I need more power in my world. And I love that plus sign that there can be a meeting point. I think what's coming up for me too is, because you talked about the fight or flight mode, it's just, women went into the workforce, 80s or something?
Don't forget freeze.
Oh yeah, freeze. That's right. The freeze.
Especially freeze is so much more prevalent than we know. So you got to put that one in there all the time. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. People need to know. So people are froze. You mean they're just froze? They don't know how to make a decision. Or I'm on my phone when I think of freeze. Like when I'm freezing, I either pace in a circle or I'm just like, I don't know what to do. I'll get on my phone. And I see that a lot.
Well, so one of the most productive things that we can do is actually identify our sequence. So when your inner caveman or inner cavewoman perceives a threat, what's your first response? And then what's your next response, and what's your next response? And so, for example, my first response to the perception of a threat is fight. I'm a fighter.
Of course you are.
I'm a fighter,
I see
right?
the sparkle in your eyes. I know that.
Yeah. So my first response is to fight. If the fight doesn't work, or I can't figure out how to fight, I freeze. I just freeze, and literally it's what mask is going to get me through this. So I'm frozen and I put a mask on, like, everything you're saying is fine with me. Or, oh, I really care about what you're saying. But behind the mask, I'm going, okay, what do I do? What do I do? What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And if my mind can't figure out a way to fight that'll be effective, then it's, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of here? How do I get out of here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I fight, then freeze, then flight. And my husband was freeze, flight, fight.
Okay.
So I'm fighting, he's frozen. All I want is for him to respond. I want him to fight back. I want him to say something. Nothing. Then, soonest opportunity, disappears. He's just gone. He disappears. And then there he is standing in front of me, his shoulders bunched up against his shoulder. Can we talk about this? And it was, oh gosh, it was probably 25 years into a 26-year marriage before we identified that was him. And so if he was in front of me with those bunched shoulders, he was at the end of his road. He was at the end of his road, and he was doing his very best. That's what those shoulders were about. He was doing his very best to protect me from his rage.
Oh, wow.
So tread carefully. He's got to this point. Listen carefully. Be gentle. Don't hit him hard. That's when he's in fight mode. Don't fight. Listen. And it took a quarter of a century to figure that out. If we could come to each other in our courtships, or someone's hiring somebody, right? So employer, employee. So what's your sequence? If I confront you with something I think wasn't done well, what am I going to get? And what does it look like, right? And if we just know our sequence, and we can see when we're revving into our sequence, and we might be able to cough out, threat, I'm perceiving a threat, and I'm about to do my sequence.
Run!
You're just like, time out. I don't want to go into the death spiral here. death spiral. And if it's safe, like, way to go, good catch. What did I do that set you off? I'm so sorry for whatever I did. Whatever I said, I'm so sorry. Okay, escaped.
So somatics, physical body, knowing in my world, we call it shadow work, or knowing your id and your ego and all that. And so know thyself, knowing yourself helps a lot, it sounds like. And then how your body reacts with feeling when the instincts are threatened.
Yeah, to be able, what I try to do is get people to memorize it. Memorize those feelings, and then tell your brain, set an awful alarm when I'm feeling this. Wake me up. Wake me up. And then when your brain is like, wakes you up to it, like, you're terrified. Oh, good brain. Thank you, brain. we seriously, we have to celebrate awareness, or our brain realizes that's not worth spending energy on. So, like, I'm always teaching women, when you emasculate a man, which we do out of fear and frustration, and your brain shows you that you did that, instead of being like, oh God, I'm such a terrible person, I wish I didn't do that, just, we call it the notice dance. noticed. It was 3 days later, but I noticed.
Oh.
And if you celebrate noticing, then your brain works for you. She celebrates noticing. Well, how about this? How about this? And then the awareness comes quicker and quicker, and even like in the middle of to take his. I noticed. Oh my gosh, I noticed my day before. I noticed. Like Greg and I had this agreement that if I hung up on him, it was because I was protecting him from me. Don't call me. Wait till I call you. Wait till I've settled down. Wait till I've sorted myself out. Hanging up, so it was a mistake. I gotta go. Boom. That I gotta go is me holding back the terrible thing I was about to say.
Yeah.
That's a victory. It's a victory to stop ourselves from hurting other people.
And it sounds like it's a victory that he knew not to take it personal. You let him know it wasn't about him, that this is my way.
Oh no, it was about him. It was about him. I always got that mad when he was lying about himself. Because to me, he was Superman. It's been a year and a half since he passed, but he was Superman. And so when he was doing this whiny, complaining, I can't do that, I don't know how to do that, you know, I just be, oh, you're just lying now. I gotta go. And I hang up.
You need that voice.
Oh, yeah. Gross.
Not hot.
Yeah. So not hot. That's not hot. Yes, exactly, Don. You got it. Not hot. So yeah, he knew it was personal, but he knew I was protecting him from saying something that I didn't want to hurt him. And so he appreciated that. And then I'd calm down, or I'd be prepared, or this is what was not okay with me about that. I could say it in a my ownership. This is what bothered me about that. And then we could talk, but he'd wait. He knew to wait because we made that deal. I'm going to hang up on you, so to protect you from me, and I will contact you when you're safe.
Curious what you do to get from, in the nonviolent communication, we call it jackal mode. So that's the 3, the fight, flight, freeze, back to the place where you can have that self-compassion, where the mind goes. It's so funny when you were telling that story. I know when I'm like in the middle of yelling, when I'm in the middle of downgrading and saying, you're not enough, I have that voice in the back of my head that says, oh, like I have a friend, she calls herself a relationship doula, my friend Mary, and she's in her 60s, and she's like, you get more with honey than vinegar. Like, that's the main thing I want to teach you. So I'll be in the middle of the vinegar, like, you had no consideration. Can't you see that I want you to pour my tea? I left it boiling for you. And then I get real, but for me, it goes back to, I started speaking to, and women have always been in the workforce. This is a general thing, but I wonder, I'm watching my mom in the 80s and 90s go back to work or go to college, go to work, first of her generation to do all that, and the parenting and the housekeeping and everything. And so I guess I noticed for her, and maybe not for her, I can only speak for me, right? For me, it isn't personal. For me, a lot of times it is, I need a tribe, and I'm trying to put everything I need into, like, I have all these responsibilities that maybe how long were we cavemen and women? Million? I don't know how long, but for a long time, it seems like these instincts worked. And now I'm like, wait a second, what? I'm doing all these roles, and I'm still a cave woman inside. And so there's a lot of fight going on here, Alison. There's a lot. Yeah.
Well, from a historical standpoint, who we think we are now just happened in the last few minutes of history.
Right.
And one of the things that happens is, let's see, trying to think the simplest way to break it down. So in my perception, what happened was predominantly during World War II, because of the effort that it was, women were required in the workplace. We had to take over shops. We had to become part of the assembly lines. We had to do things that were thought either men didn't want us to have to do that stuff. They'd rather we got to be our sparkly selves, or it was thought that we weren't able to. Like in the beginning of the 20th century, in the 1900s, the YWCA was criticized because they wanted to teach women to type, and women were thought not smart enough to type.
Yeah, wow, we showed them.
We showed them, yeah. So, but if you can imagine a reality where you never think a woman could be a secretary, right? And then being a secretary being considered demeaning, right? That we shifted that much in less than 100 years, right? So if you take the Dolly Parton 9 to 5 movie, right, and you put that on, that in the early 1900s you weren't considered smart enough to learn to type, and now we're only typists, and then how many female CEOs and executives and managers are there that who hired them to do those jobs? In most cases, it was men who don't care whether you have an innie or an outie. They just care about who's going to produce the result, which is part of who they are. But if you look at this, we're not even really in the paradigm we think we're in. We still have these very primitive instincts. We still have brains that are created by testosterone and estrogen and the perception of threats around every corner, for women at least. Very few things that threaten men in terms of physical safety, but productivity all the time. So you put this all together, and women, the association that making our own money gave us value and independence, because for so long we weren't allowed to own property, and we were in fact property ourselves. Yep. Right? So we belonged to our fathers, and then if our fathers died, we belonged to our brothers, and if we got married, we belonged to our husbands, and we didn't have any assets of our own. So making that money, when we started to make money, right, in the middle of the 1900s, we associated money with power, money with independence, money with power. We wanted more of it, and we're super perceptive about what's valued in any environment, and we can adapt very easily to what's valued because honestly we have a pretty weak sense of ourselves, so our adaptability is very high. So now we live in an era that depends upon communication and connection and relationship and seeing the interrelatedness of things, which an estrogen soaked brain excels at. Oh. Right? But so we can excel at making money, in many cases more than the men were mated to, but we expect them to then be accountable for taking care of the home, for example, in the way that the brain that allows us to now excel at making money perceives all the things that a home requires. So we have the brain that operates in both places. Their brain excels at hunting a result and chasing it down no matter what, and killing it and dragging it home, right? And so they've done studies. The faster an object is moving, the bigger the difference between a woman and a man and a woman's ability to see it. Huh. Yeah. So men can see hockey pucks flying across the ice. We can't follow the puck because it's too fast, but dust is invisible to them.
Did not see that coming. That's hilarious.
It's not moving. It's invisible to them.
Oh my gosh, it has to be moving to see. The more it moves, the more they see.
Yeah, they're like a T-Rex in Jurassic Park. If it's not moving, they can't see it. And so relevance has to always be clear to them. To all the picky things that we think about in our homes, they don't see. That's not important. They don't do it because it's not important to do. We think they don't do it because they're not smart enough to know what's important to do.
Sure.
But these things out of place, like things that are out of place, are critically important to a woman. Because if you imagine you go to your meadow where you've gone to pick your greens and your berries every day, and now something's out of place, how the heck did that get out of place? Was there a bear here? Is he still here? Am I going to die because there was a bear that rearranged my meadow, pulled out a tree? Why is that chair out of place? How did it get there? Right? Like our instincts have us notice everything that's out of place, and it talks to us. Mm-hmm. So we pick things up and we put them in their place reflexively. And we don't understand why a man steps over a sock. Is he an idiot? No, it's just irrelevant. It's a sock. What does it have to do with getting ready for bed or getting ready to go to work or playing a game with a child? It's just a sock.
It's not going to get us. It's not going to come out and attack us.
Wait,
I can't even see it. It's not moving. That's incredible. That's so interesting.
It's just nothing. And I mean, there's a study that I think it's, I forget her first name right now, Fisher, she's brilliant, quotes where, oh, it's so funny, Don. There's so many instincts at play. Like, for example, if you think about hunting versus gathering, a hunter's going to see a deer, shoot the deer, drag it home. A gatherer is going to see a berry bush and collect all the right berries from the front of the bush, the back of the bush, and the center of the bush, right? So map that on a refrigerator. You want to hide anything from a man, just put it in the second or third row. He won't even look there. That's the center of the berry bush. He doesn't look to the center of the herd to kill a deer. He sees a deer, he kills a deer, right? So we can hide food from men so easily, right? And women are considered to not have great spatial relationships. But they did a study in England where they took men and women down the aisles of a grocery store. They pointed out specific items for them to remember. Then they blindfolded them, drove them miles and miles away, said the item, and asked both the men and women to point in the direction of that item. They had been blindfolded, right? Not only were the women way more accurate in knowing the direction that food item was, their accuracy improved with the caloric value of the food.
Interesting. Wow, that is primal. That is some primal. I'm in the woods. There's my berry patch.
Yeah, the higher the calories,
wow,
the more accurate the women were, period, right? Men, the faster it's going, the easier for them to perceive. The study that Fisher quotes, there's $100 bills, and they're being blown in the air, and they have a group of boys try to catch them, and then they have a group of girls try to catch them, and the boys on average caught 6.
Okay.
You know what the girls caught?
20? No, none. Because they're moving.
They were moving.
They're moving. That's right.
No girl even caught 1. To get an average of 0, you have to have 0 because of the speed. And so, like, I'm always teaching men and women about this, that the faster something's going, the bigger the difference in his perception. So when he's navigating traffic and moving in and out of the cars, and she thinks she's going to die.
No wonder I hate driving. This is making so much sense. It's my estrogen. I mean, driving, I hate driving. It stresses me.
And then we have diffuse awareness. And so if someone's like changing lanes in our direction, it seems like that car is going to hit me, that car's coming into our lane.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I mean, another way to look at it, if you want to, is men tend to be pack animals, the hunters, and women tend to be herd animals, the prey. So we react more like horses do, while men would react more like wolves do. And and the tendency of horses is flight. Their reaction is flight.
That's right.
Right? And we're more flighty than men are. We can be motivated by fear.
Yes.
Right? Men, when they're afraid, they're more likely to attack. A fear biter, right? That's why the fighter I am is a little unusual, but I spent a lot of lifetimes as a man. I'm learning to be a girl.
That makes sense.
So, yeah, to have a unique experience, access to why do men do what they do. I just remember. So it's all these things. If we can just be curious about it. What if there's a good reason for that? What if there's a good reason for everything everybody does? And if we just got more curious about it instead of projecting motivation on each other and accusing the other person of not caring or loving or respecting, which doesn't go anywhere, it all turned out much better.
I love that. I love that. Sounds like acceptance and learning to go with the flow, not taking things personally. I'm wondering if you could
the exception of, I would say acknowledgement, like that's real, rather than acceptance, which is I gotta put up with it.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
Because both men and women, if we set way more boundaries, like 1,000 times more boundaries than we do, everything would go much better.
There we go. Boundaries. It's hard because a lot of women are taught to be good girls and just do, like when I was little was like, be quiet, be good, make everyone happy. But
you don't have to be taught none. The instinct to survive by pleasing is so strong. No one has to teach
one of the
anything.
primitive instinct, nature and nurture. It's actually a nature in us to do that.
Yeah, it's nature, and it's how parents can dominate by approval and disapproval. Mm-hmm. Much more with girls than they can with boys.
Yep. Having a brother, I could see that. I know we don't have a ton more time. I really wanted to ask you one more thing. And you brought it up, the hormonal thing. I'm going into, I'm 41, so things are shifting. And as I get curious how relationships change as the hormones change. I'm guessing the instinct, I don't have the instinct to like, I want a baby, like that's gone. Like all these instincts are changing. So does that change partnerships in the way we relate to each other? I'm sure some of these primitive things stay.
There's actually some really significant things that change. And Luann Brizendine of the female brain does a brilliant job of it, and distinguishing between like the teenage brain and the mature brain, and she does great stuff. And I've never read her whole book. Luann and I've spoken more than once, and there's a lot of love and admiration between us. But Greg read the whole book. And when I was in my 40s and we bought, in our mid 40s, we bought our home in Colorado, and I was just dying to move there, and it didn't work out the way I wanted. So I went there every month on my own, just gasping for air and to escape. At that time, I didn't know how to shield myself. I'm an empath, and I didn't know how to shield myself. And now I do, which is awesome. I can be in LA and not get all wigged out. But so I went every month, no matter what. And one time Greg said, honey, thank you so much for having me read Luann's book, because before I read her book, I thought that you had abandoned us. And now that I read her book about the mature female brain, now I know you had already abandoned us.
And you were supposed to. It's called the midlife evolution.
What happens is that as it becomes critical levels at about 29. Our brains go off because most of our estrogen and half of our testosterone comes from the ovum. And now they're approaching critical levels of they just dissolve and disappear, right? We had about 3 million when we were in utero, and now we're down to hundreds of thousands. And the rate at which they're just dissolving and disappearing is speeding up. So by 35, the alarms are just screaming about making babies. But what's happening is, with the change in our hormones, the care and tend section of our brain is shutting down. It's literally closing up for business, and the impulse to tend to other people's needs, to care about all their preferences, to organize our lives around them is disappearing. And like that brain, part of the brain is just going out of business. And that's what had been happening to me. And I wasn't adapting to my husband and my children the way that I normally did. I was paying way more attention to what I needed and what fed me and my purpose. And what's great about what Luann pointed out is that we have a choice, and we can reactivate the care and tend part of our brain literally by sniffing baby pheromones. Yeah. So this is why a woman can be pregnant and it's a predicament, and she's afraid she's not going to be a good mother because she doesn't care and tend to people. And then her baby's born and she's nursing her baby and she's sniffing the fumes, and all of a sudden all she cares about is this baby, and she loves being a mom, and all she wants to do is organize her life about being a mom. That happened in her brain. And
which I can't even imagine at this point. I'm like, I see a baby and I'm like, I'm like, you just keep it over there. It's so cute. I'll take a puppy.
That's so funny. Well, what was great about Luann pointing it out, like you can wake up the care and tend part of your brain again by sniffing baby pheromones. My sister-in-law just given birth, and so I'm holding Misha and going, come on, Misha, Greg needs me to cook. He needs me to cook again. He needs me to care about cooking. Come on.
You're hilarious.
Yeah, and her point is, you can be a $5 Christmas card grandmother if you want, or you can be a drop the kids by any time grandmother if you want. We can decide. It's not just luck. We can decide. The hormones are so powerful. We can decide. And I don't have grandchildren yet. I have honorary grandchildren, and I adore them. And they're so tiring.
That's what all the grandmas say. My mom says that too. She goes, there's a reason why we can't have kids after a certain age.
There's a reason. So, but I have a 9-month-old baby girl that's come into my life because of the man I'm in love with. And it's just, I'm just delighted. I was absolutely delighted to have little critters in my life, and a 16-year-old man. And, it's like, so it's awesome to have young people back in my life.
It's brought that life force. And there's that in-between place. My caretaking, you explained so much. I got tears in my eyes because my caretaking had to be reignited due to having a sick teenager. My teenager has become chronically ill, and it is even though, it's reactivated, here I am cooking special meals, doing the medications. It did not feel, and I will do it. I would always choose to do it. But there is something at 41 that seemed to really not be okay with this. And I have a really good therapist. He said, because by 15, this was supposed to be your time where there was less, and it's so much, but it is and it is my dharma, and there's beautiful things about it, bringing our souls together, and they're definitely stronger because of that. But yeah, I'm glad you could answer that for me about that, because I didn't know what was going on, but when you talked about the hormones, I'm like, wait, then there's something about instincts changing. And how beautiful you are. Just, I got so excited to interview us. I've been watching your videos for a while. A friend referred you to me. And as I watched you, I'm just like, she is hilarious, loving, such a big heart, and just a genuine good person I would want to get to know. So I thank you for giving me that honor and for getting to share your wisdom on the New Era Awakenings podcast. I did see on your website that you're getting ready to teach, I think it's the Lux Event, Extraordinary Relationships. That's coming up, what, December 4th?
It's this weekend. It's actually Saturday and Sunday, and registration is on the web is closing. People can still register on the phone until Thursday, I think.
Okay.
And I'm thrilled with it. In January, it's the first new material that I'd come out with in years, and we wanted to do it again. But with COVID-19, live workshops are not practical or advisable. Mm-hmm. And so we've converted it to online, and I think it's going to be way better than the live version because of what I get to do with it online. And it's really about, it starts with the premise, honor yourself first or all is lost. Mm-hmm. And what would it be like? What could it look like? What would we engage in? How would we speak, and how would we listen, and how would we be being if we were in what I call a process of honoring? And how does a process of honoring naturally progress to bigger and bigger and more magnificent levels? And really that it starts with, you'd think, respect would be a good level to get to. No, respect is the level at which a process of honoring starts. And respect means to grant the innate value of something. And what if we start with granting the innate value of not only who we are, but everything about us? What if every single thing about you, including the things you think are your greatest weaknesses, have innate value? What if you started there? What if you started with that kind of honoring of yourself? And as it progresses from respect to seeking to seeing to understanding to acknowledging to protecting, for example, that's where we become really good at boundaries and not letting people criticize or take down or negate what's true for us. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you know it as an intuitive. Everybody that I've ever known that would classify themselves as a psychic, the truth of them being a psychic didn't come anywhere near its potential until they began honoring it about themselves. That my mentor would say, power is not in the truth. Power is in the acceptance of the truth.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, so when we accept what's true about us, then we start to protect things that are worth protecting. And having around us the people who can receive our gifts instead of beating our heads against the wall, with the people who can't and actively won't, right? And yeah, we could have a whole conversation about intuition.
I would love to do that as a part 2 at some point if you have a chance, because that's and
ask for it. Yeah, just ask for it. But it's worth. Yeah, I couldn't make the difference that I've been able to make until I started owning my intuition, and how many. One of the intuitions I have would be called clairaudient. So I can hear what people aren't saying. I can hear what people aren't asking. I can hear the word that is the crux of the matter, right? And like you were talking about downloads. Yes, downloads. So much of my work has come from downloads. And
have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and had to write it all out? Yes,
oh, yeah.
I get woken up and they're like, write it down. You have a whole academy now. I'm like, it's 4 in
Yeah.
the morning.
Yeah, I've designed whole year-long programs based on a downline. Do it like this, and it comes down like
Yep.
it comes down like Star Wars words.
Yes, it's like a rush and a high too. Getting it through, being able to be the channel to get it out. I'm like, this is like it's an amazing feeling for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm about to, but it takes a surrendering, because both the Keys of the Kingdom and the Queen's Code are books that I thought I was going to write, but when I went to write them, movies began playing. And so I didn't write them. I transcribed them from movies.
Cool.
And just like typing as fast as I could and watching this movie. And how do you describe that? She's and just typing as fast as I could. And it's been 10 years since I wrote the Queen's Code,
Mm-hmm.
and I've learned so much more. And there's things I've shifted the way that I talk about it so it's more acceptable. And so I'm writing the second edition this month, and
Yes.
so I'm updating that work, which is the whole point. And so anyhow, we'll come back to it sometime. It'll be fun. Intuition.
I would love that. So I'm going to have your, and the empath piece too, because you spoke to that. And that's one of the number one questions I get. I wrote a mini course on protecting yourself as an empath, but I know the majority of the listeners are empaths. So empath, intuition, part 2, maybe sometime next year. I would love that. And I'll have your website posted here. And it's just been a true honor, Alison. You are magic. Yeah, thank you so much.